But something that really stuck with me all these years was every single astronaut. They were either religious or spiritual when they launched. And if they weren't, they came back religious or spiritual. I'm classified, so I can't really talk about it. I said, Dad, you haven't worn a uniform since 1971. Let's go. So he says, I don't know. If this is the case, why isn't the government releasing this stuff to us? And he said, because our brains couldn't handle it. It may be something that's so, it would rewrite the course of history should it become out that we, do have ancient, aliens that have been around. My dad said that they won't talk about if there are in fact aliens because they're afraid that they're going to make everybody's mind implode. The one thing that we will not tell anybody about, out of courtesy.
Gail is an ex-employee of NASA. She worked for NASA for 17 years and started in the information technology group, connecting computers on employees' desks, teaching them about the internet, and later on became a safety and occupational health specialist at NASA. Her dad was also an Air Force pilot, which is why she got a lot of interesting stories to tell.
And I kind of think that there might actually be some top secret projects out there that may be reverse engineered alien spacecraft. We don't know because they look absolutely so weird. Some of those media guys would come at me with some really wild questions. Okay, I'll give you a couple of good examples of that.
I got reminded of this movie called Don't Look Up. So, have you seen that movie?
Oh, yeah. Oh, I have.
So, Gail, you have been a former employee of NASA as well, and besides being a real estate agent, on which I have made a separate podcast and I'll publish it soon before I publish this one. So if you're interested about real estate, then please go check it out as well. So, but in this episode, we will be deep diving into space and about her experience about in NASA and what she learned. And people still they have a big dream of getting into NASA. People still wonder about space and how about the universe and how it came into existence and what still it's left to discover about our existence and the universe. And so based on that thirst for knowledge, people want to get into NASA, people want to work for space agencies, and it's been such a privilege to get to know Gail, who has worked for NASA in the past. And today we will get to know about all the exciting stuff about NASA and about her experiences, about her the rocket launches she has seen, about what maybe even some deep secrets about NASA which normal people do not know. You never know. We are going to unleash a lot of things about NASA and space in general, and we will have a great episode this time, hopefully. So, Gail, many people think that to get into NASA, you will have to be super strong, super fit, super eligible, or else you cannot get into NASA. And I have made a podcast previously about space, and my guest at that time was very sad that she could not become an astronaut for NASA because she was never that athletic about her physique, and she did not have that stamina. So which was she was very sad that she could not get into NASA. So how do people who are not that fit but who wants to explore and who wants to work for NASA can get into NASA? And more important, how did you get into NASA? What are the steps and the obstacles that you had to overcome to get into NASA?
Well, first off, thank you for having me on your podcast today. And you have given me a couple of really interesting questions to start out with. First off, there's one thing that's really kind of interesting about NASA and Kennedy Space Center in particular is we were like our own little city. And everybody thought we all ran around in lab coats and, we were all astronauts and doing all these wonderful things. But we have different contractors, but we ran our own city, essentially. We had our own firefighting, police department, We had our own post office. There was custodians. There was secretaries. Everybody had a different position. Now, a lot has changed since shuttle program ended. So I was what was called a pre-challenge or post-Challenger hire. After the Challenger accident in 1986, they decided to increase the safety and mission assurance and the quality assurance departments. So they did this big hiring blitz, and I came in on that hiring blitz. But the way I came in was I was a GS3, which is like low on the totem pole. But I wanted to work for NASA so bad I was willing to take any position they gave me. So then what happened after I got hired is the way that NASA worked with its different IT departments, we had the shuttle payload servers, the shuttle servers, the payload servers, and the ground operations servers. None of them talked to each other, which I thought was so amazing. And what they were doing was bringing internet out there, essentially, and tying all the employees into that. And that's how I got my start. They asked me, do you know anything about internet? Well, I'd written a term paper on it for college and on Artemis, which was the predecessor to the internet as we know it today. And I also knew about Prodigy. So I said, I'm familiar with it. And that got me in the door to the ID department. So when I was there, I was working with the employees to get them started. I had to show them how to turn on a computer, how to use a mouse, and wrote the owner or the training manuals for that. Well, then I had an opportunity to go to work for the Environmental Program Office because I had received or earned a hazardous material technologies degree. So after I got that, I ended up in the environmental department for many years. And then they had me working on propellants, the nasty stuff that goes into the orbiter. And I managed that until the shuttle program ended, and then everything switched. They went to contractors. So to actually get into NASA per se nowadays, it's more difficult because there's not that many actual civil servants paid by Congress. There's a lot of contractors, and there's a lot of different opportunities with contractors. So that's primarily where people go in. And they kind of blanket it with, I work for NASA. Well, yeah, you work for NASA because you're a contractor, but I worked for NASA overseeing these contractors. So it was kind of a different thing. But I wouldn't discourage anybody from looking at it. And as far as our astronauts go, most of them have applied multiple times to get to the astronaut corps. And there's usually about 10 to 12,000 applicants a year. And
That's a lot.
That is totally a lot. And then they put it down into different interviews and things like that. So out of those 10,000, we may have where we've hired 150 or 100. There's a lot less now needed because the crews are much smaller. So I say never give up. I didn't give up. I don't think anybody should give up. But I do know, and I've spoken with a lot of astronauts about what it took to get there. And it's a lot of hard work. It's a lot of dedication. And once they get through that, then they'll go ahead and, apply. But all of us in the background are helping those astronauts fly. So even though we don't personally fly, we feel like we are with them because of the work we've put in.
I know this is like very generalized question because obviously NASA has different types of employees who serve different kind of purposes. But if
Yes.
someone wants to get into NASA, then what are some of the steps would you recommend them to follow? Because let's say they are fascinated about how NASA works and they just want to work for them. So what are some of the steps they need to follow in order to get into NASA?
Well, those are excellent questions. But the first thing I would do would be go ahead and get some knowledge about what they're doing, overall in the missions. Like, for example, we're getting ready to go to the moon. Okay, they're going to be doing a lot of hiring to go ahead and get us to the moon. So I would say that if you look on the NASA websites, which is what is it? I think it's www.nasa.gov/careers, or at least it was when I was there. So you start looking at seeing what the different opportunities are. Some of them are entry level, and other ones are going to need advanced degrees. And then there's everything in between. But I would say, what do you love? I mean, for example, we had an entire television studio out there at the Space Center. Okay. And we
Oh.
had the people that do the audio and the video and everything. And if you're interested in doing that, that would be an excellent contribution. If you are interested
Hmm.
in, say, being an engineer, an aerospace engineer, where you actually touch flight hardware, then you're going to definitely need to go ahead and get into some type of education where you're able to take care of that hardware that you're working with. And then again, same with software programs. We have a lot of software programs behind our, you know, launches and everything. So someone could possibly pursue that too.
So you're saying that, YouTubers and content creators, can they also have a chance, like they edit videos or content for NASA, which like later on goes to the public or something like that?
Yeah, as far as the content creators, we have they have social media groups that come
Yes.
in. We were hiring, or not actually hiring, we were selecting high school students that wanted to do content creation and then go ahead and put it out on the social media channels. That would be one option for them. And as far as other types of opportunities, you could be an independent writer and then write stories about the missions and submit them to like Aviation Week or different types of media and advertising and newspapers and things like that because they like to pick up those types of stories.
Hmm. That's interesting because it shows that when people think of NASA, they mainly think about going to space and being the bold astronaut who like will be thrown into the unknown, and like, or mainly about the researchers or about the people who are at the forefront of the media, right? Whatever we see in the media, people like think of that in that way, because when it comes to NASA or like space agencies, we only see the rocket launches, we only see the researchers, we only see the astronauts, but we do not get to see the people working who are like behind the scenes, who are also playing a very crucial role. And most of the times they do not even get their due credits or mentioned like in the TV broadcast, because it's like there's so many people, it's hard to mention so many people. But he just showed that people from different like professions or different like people who have different expertise can also work for NASA. And I think that is like refreshing to know, because it's not limiting your views when you're viewing NASA, or when you are working, like when you're trying to like work for NASA. Let's
Hmm.
say if I wanted to work for NASA and I am like, oh, I'm not a good astronaut, so I cannot work for NASA. But now I got to know that, okay, even the content creators or editors can work for NASA. So, okay, now I can, enhance my editing skills or my video creation skills and get to work for NASA. So, yeah, I think that was very, refreshing. So, like, you have worked for NASA for a long time, and you have like seen some of the highlights and some of the key moments of like NASA's journey. What are some of the highlights which like you would like to mention in terms of like rocket launches or NASA's new discoveries or inventions that you have witnessed during your career?
Well, I started in March of 1991, so I have actually seen quite a bit. We launched the first segments of Space Station, and the gentleman that is now the administrator, Bob Cabana, he is a retired Marine Corps fighter pilot. He was an astronaut. He became our center director, and then he became an administrator. But very few people know that he launched on the vehicle, and then he actually turned on the power inside a space station. As he likes to say, I actually turned on the
Oh.
lights, and he was the first person that went into the space station, which is ultimately kind of cool too. And then watching it grow from like one module out to what we see now, and I'm sure everybody's seen it while it's in orbit. It's actually pretty
Mm.
big. And
Yes.
when you try to track it when you're on ground, you're usually seeing the solar arrays,
And it's one of
the
the most
flashing.
expensive things like people have ever built. I have like seen in some Google search or in articles that it's one of the like rarest moments when nations came together for a project, and they really made it happen. And a lot of research stuff goes into the space station, and it flies really fast. Like for an object to like fly that fast, that close to our like Earth's surface, to the point where you can, like, if you keep a track of it, you can actually see it from the ground. So I think that's one of the like engineering marvels humanity has ever achieved.
It really is. And one of the questions I got is, how do you justify your budget? That was always a fun one for me, because it
Mm.
sits there somewhere between 17 billion and 20 billion dollars, and everybody's like, well, that's a stupid amount of money. But when you look at it as far as the entire United States government budget goes, we actually got less than 0.5% of the entire budget. And for every dollar spent in NASA, we were turning around 3 times that much back into what we call technology transfer. I'll give you a couple examples of that you may not think about. Now, by the way, we did not invent Velcro, but we sure used the heck out of it. But like, I have a nephew that is a insulin-dependent diabetic, and at the
Mm.
time back in the day, he had to get injections. Well, now he got an insulin pump. Would you know that that insulin pump was actually developed on the space station itself? Okay.
Really?
And another, yeah. And another good example of that, have you ever seen those Coolman coolers that you can plug into a DC in your car and it either heats it up or cools it off?
Mm. Yeah.
Well, that was also a NASA technology transfer. What we did was,
Mm.
that was how we got payloads off of the vehicle after it landed. We had insulating coolers that either it was warm or it's cold. And then after, we're supposed to turn over our technology. So, of course, we turned that over. And the NASCAR racers, they have extremely high temperatures inside their vehicles. Well, they asked us for some thermal protection blankets so that they could test them to see if they wanted to put those into their cars. So there's another
Mm.
good example of what we did. There's a lot of different things that people see every day that they're like, what the heck good is it? Well, if you've ever had orthoscopic surgery and you've had one of those tiny cameras injected into the little incision so that the doctor can see what they're doing, shuttle
Mm.
technology. There's a lot of different things that have come about with the space program that people don't fully understand or give credit to. We weren't expensive. I mean, that money I'm talking about kept the lights on, payroll, running our vehicles, paying for propellants, paying for the launches. It's quite extreme and very intensive. So when I'd get family or friends that sit there and after a launch would congratulate me, I'd say, well, me and on behalf of 25,000 other people, I thank you, because it was all of us working together. It just wasn't one individual. And you'll hear the pride of it all coming together. And you
Mm.
talked about what are some of the highlights. Man, there was a lot of highlights. But one of the things I really liked was listening to the astronauts after they came back from space, because we'd have these employee briefings where they'd come back and they would thank us. And then they would talk about the mission and show us all these cool pictures. But something that
Mm.
really stuck with me all these years was every single astronaut. They were either religious or spiritual when they launched. And if they weren't, they came back religious or spiritual,
Oh.
because they said it was such an experience that they knew that there had to be a higher being, that we just didn't come about, that there was debris and gases that came about, and lo and behold, we have Earth. And they also said something else
Mm.
powerful to me. There were no borders. They didn't see borders in these countries. All they saw was this beautiful blue marble out in the middle of space. But they just didn't have the separations. We have flown with lots of different crews from lots of different company or countries, and there's collaboration there. It didn't matter where you came from. It didn't matter if you were from Europe or Asia or the United States. They were all together working on this program together. And I think that was extremely magnificent for us to be able to pull that off.
So many food for thoughts and like things we can elaborate from here now on. And
Yeah.
while I was digging into it, about like Mars exploration and like Elon Musk's plan to explore Mars, and and like any expensive space project in general, I see people getting divided into few into few categories. One of the categories like, yeah, we should go and humanity should strive to make it better improvements and make more discoveries. And the other one is like, already have so many problems on Earth. Why bother spending so much money on space travel and something that is quite risky, to be honest? And to be honest, we do not know a lot about our Earth itself, right?
Yeah.
We do not know what's like so many species and plants we are yet to discover from deep inside the ocean and from the Amazon rainforest, and about
Hmm.
like our own atmosphere and about our own weather system and all this kind of stuff. And that is fascinating, to be honest. But the thing is, people, just like you said, they do not realize that some of the technologies which we use today very commonly comes from the space industry. Maybe not all of the missions are 100% successful, but there are a lot of learnings and technologies which can be taken from those space missions. And I'm not saying that this justifies or not justifies like spending billions into space, because that's up to people, like to the individual selves. But what I'm trying to say, like I'm trying to highlight this point, because this point I feel like it does not get highlighted enough into the media, because it's like it's not like like a well-known thing. People are not aware of it, that we get to use so many technologies from the media, from the space industry. And another
Hmm.
thing about like borders, that's a like a tricky thing to say, but like a few days ago or a few weeks ago, I saw a meme on Facebook that's not exactly funny. Memes are usually funny, but that was not funny. And there was like an alien species was looking. I'll try to like post. I'll try to edit the picture of the meme if I find it. So the meme was something like alien species was looking like from a third person point of view towards the earth, and the earth, like people were fighting and were in chaos. And like one alien was asking the other alien, so what's wrong, why are they fighting? And the other alien was like, oh, they're fighting because they created imaginary borders between them. I
Yeah,
was
that's
like,
very profound, and that's very true. Not to digress, but I did see another one after we launched the rovers. They had a picture of the rover, and it says the first photos from Mars. And it had these Martians in front of a copy machine making pictures of the scape, and they were holding it up in front of the camera so that that's what the rover was seeing. But behind the aliens was like these large cities with spacecraft flying behind
yes,
them
yes,
and
yes.
everything else like that. But
Hmm.
I get that a lot. I've asked, well, why? Why are we sitting there pursuing this? Okay, surprisingly, we have more information and more photos of the surface of Mars than we do of our own oceans, which kind of blows me away a little bit. But everybody
Hmm.
says, well, why are we doing that when we got all these other things going on? But see, it's kind of an understanding. If we understand what's going on in our universe, for example, there's talk about maybe Mars was inhabitable, many years ago, and now it's not. So what happened to Mars? Those are the kind of questions that we need to know if we're going to sustain humans in this universe. And when I
Hmm.
retired in 2017, we were all about going to Mars. It was like not it was going to Mars. Okay. Well, now it's changed. Now they're going back to the moon because they want to have a sustained base. Getting to Mars would be hard. Getting from Mars, and then 50 years ago we went on the moon, and how are we going to get there when we've been in low Earth orbit? There was a lot of questions about how we could make that happen. But think about this for a minute, okay? When you look up in the sky, a lot of the stars you see are no longer there. You're looking back into
Yes.
time, okay? And that's kind of weird and creepy to think about. So all of
Hmm.
those photos that we get from Hubble and now James Webb, I mean, the James Webb photos are shockingly cool, but they're giving us a snapshot back into time. See? So it helps us to have a better understanding on how we can sit there and keep from burning up our Earth, and keep it habitable. But from what I'm seeing, I personally am a little disappointed because I'm seeing how we are actually destroying our own Earth. And we're almost at a tipping point, unfortunately. But knowledge is power, and what we're trying to do is get the knowledge about the universe and also where we came from and where we're going. And the other good question I used to get is, are we alone in the universe? Well, I don't know. But think about that. Now that James Webb is showing us all these different galaxies, they have actually found, they said, millions of potential planets that could sustain life in our own universe. Wow. I mean, that's amazing to think that there could be advanced intelligence out there. I mean, there obviously is. And then, people always talk about, UFOs. Well, my dad was a pilot, and he said anything we couldn't identify was a UFO. It could be anything. And, if we didn't know what it was automatically a UFO. But I did ask him, I said, because he was there during the time of Roswell. He was in the Army Air Corps at the time. And I said, well, he just had surgery. He was coming out of anesthesia. I found out that's not a good time to ask people questions. So I said, so Dad, was there anything to Roswell? And he looked at me deadpan serious, and he said, yes. And I was like, freaking out. He just came out of the operating room. So I went there the next day, and I said, okay, Dad, spill the beans. What did you tell me, or what were you talking about? And he goes, first off, I don't remember our conversation yesterday, but even if I did know, I'm classified, so I can't really talk about it. I said, Dad, you haven't worn a uniform since 1971. Let's go. So he says, I don't know. He said it would be ridiculous for us to, now this is a colonel now, it would be ridiculous for us to think that we are alone in the universe. I have myself, when flying missions, have seen things I didn't know what the heck they were. And as far as alien bodies, I cannot confirm nor deny that they were actually taken to Ohio because I really don't know. It's things like that. And Roswell's always fascinated me because if you think about it, everybody's like, oh, it was a weather balloon. Well, it wasn't. And then they say, well, it may have been an alien aircraft that got hit by lightning. Now think about that. If it was an alien aircraft with intelligent life, they've been dodging all kind of stuff to do intergalactic flights. So do you think a bolt of lightning on the Earth is going to take them down? I mean, those are kind of philosophical questions, but we got asked that a lot. If, we're alone, or, is there anything to Roswell or anything? But that's my theory, is they didn't get hit by lightning.
What actually happened, like, in the Roswell incident? Like, can you describe it in short?
In short, there was a farmer that woke up one day and found a whole bunch of metal type of debris for miles all over his farm. And he called the sheriff, who called the local, folks. I think it was White Sands Test Facility that came out, and they quietly picked up all these pieces. And then they told everybody, don't say anything about it. And then the next day it was, the news said they found a flying saucer, is what they called it. And then after that was a retraction. Oh, gee, it was just a weather balloon. Well, I've seen tons of weather balloons. And what they were showing was definitely not, a weather balloon. But basically something caused this spacecraft to crash. And some theories are the military shot it. Now, these poor aliens, they're thinking, I'm thinking if I was out there, I'd be like, God, Earthlings are kind of barbaric to each other, and they're fighting us, and they're shooting at us. But if they were really aliens, and if there was this going on in this case, don't you think that they could have probably blown us out of the universe if they wanted to? I mean, I'm thinking, yeah. If they got from wherever they got, they could definitely, zap us if they wanted to. I don't think if there are aliens that they're any danger to us. You know,
Hmm.
I think that Earthlings are more of a danger to each other. You know.
I feel like if the civilization is advanced enough to travel light years in a spacecraft and visit us, it will be that much hard for them to, destroy us or do harm to us for whatever um, for whatever purpose they want to achieve. And they might not even think about us in that way, and they might just want to do whatever they want to do. Like, let's say we are an advanced civilization compared to ants, right? Do we hate on ants? We don't. We don't hate on ants. We just do whatever we want to do, right? I mean,
Hmm.
people generally don't hate ants, but we do not like think about their existence if we have to establish a building somewhere in near their habitat, right? So people think that, oh, like they will come and fight us, but the thing is, we are not really that much advanced. I mean, like for I feel like for our narrow vision, we have achieved a lot, and I'm not underestimating the people who have done the work. They have done absolutely fabulous job, but we still do not know around like 90 or 95% about the universe. We do not know what, like, why the universe is expanding. That's why we call it like dark energy, right? That's
Yeah.
causing the expansion of the universe. We call it dark energy because we do not literally know about it. Right? So, and it said that at the pace at which the universe is expanding, many of the stars which we see right now will be out of our like vision in a few hundred years or so, and we still do not know why. And we claim
Right.
ourselves to be like one of the most advanced civilization. We are one of the most advanced civilization, yet we struggle to go to our nearest planet, which is Mars. And like
Yeah.
that should like humble us people, even though we are getting to know about the origins of the universe and stuff like that, but there are still so many things which we do not know about, that we do not know what we do not know. That's basically
Yes.
that's basically the conclusion of it.
Well, it's true. We don't know what we don't know. And then when they talk about the expansion of the universe, you have to realize that it's expanding into infiniteness. It's not going to like suddenly expand and then stop because it hits, a proverbial wall or anything like that.
Hmm.
But what's always very fascinating to me is we've gone through 5 mass extinctions on Earth. Okay, a lot of folks think about the one with the dinosaurs and the meteor and what happened there. But what
Hmm.
happened with the other 4 extinctions? How do we know that we weren't at one time a planet that had advanced knowledge and technologies and we messed up somehow? That's kind of a philosophical thing. But when you look at the remnants of what's left on Earth, when they haven't really understood how we can have an Earth that's 6 billion years old, but we're finding things all over the world that we should have been playing with rocks and fire, but yet we're finding these things that have carvings that are very old and very exact. There's a lot of not fully understanding, and it might be that our brains can't understand it.
Hmm.
I asked my dad about that. I said, well, if this is the case, why isn't the government releasing this stuff to us? And he said, because our brains couldn't handle it. It may be something that's it would rewrite the course of history should it become out that we, do have ancient, aliens that have been around. But when the vehicles used to fly and they were in orbit, you can actually see things behind them and they would report things. Now, these
Hmm.
are highly trained astronauts. They oftentimes have experience as fighter pilots, military pilots, and everything else like that. And they're looking out the window going, I don't know what the world that is. And then, of
Hmm.
course, we've had these recent Navy footages of the folks coming off aircraft carriers or whatever, seeing vehicles that defy physics. So where are they coming from? you know? And it
Hmm.
seems another fascinating thing is they're very intrigued by our nuclear sites. You know, there was a case back in the 1960s where they deactivated the intercontinental ballistic missiles in South Dakota somehow and disarmed them, and they don't know why. Or they're over Nevada because the Nevada test site where we were doing atomic bomb testing. You know, they seem to be drawn to wondering about our nuclear programs. You know, if you go that far into aliens, which I kind of have, you know, I've looked at it. You know, NASA's got, I can't remember the numbers. It's like 11,000 to 12,000 for our nomenclature for our filing systems that actually
Hmm.
talked about what they call now unidentified aerial phenomena. The UFO thing went away. They came up with a new
Hmm.
acronym that's called a UAP, which is
Hmm.
unidentified aerial phenomena. So those reports come in every day, but where are they coming from? So, but you know, that's a little bit more out of outside of NASA because we're more interested in understanding space. We work with the National Aeronautics and Oceanic Administration because we want to understand how the oceans and the weather are affected here on Earth, and they utilize NASA
Hmm.
for their studies. So, you know, that's another good example of good things that NASA is doing to try to understand, you know, why are we getting these huge hurricanes, these monsoons, these major weather events that are causing havoc.
Hmm. There are some of the things which I would like to talk about, and
Mm-hmm.
like you made some very good points about our own civilization, like in Earth. There
Thank
is
you.
this theory called the Great Filter. I don't know whether you're aware of it or not. So the theory, if I'm not wrong, goes something like there is if there is no advanced civilization on this universe, there has to be something that prevented civilizations from becoming like advanced after a certain level. It
Mm-hmm.
can be like they became so advanced that they destroyed themselves, which we humans are absolutely capable of doing so. Like, or there has to be like a catastrophe which after some point like destroyed that civilization, which can also happen. It can be natural catastrophe. um so like it talks about a certain kind of barrier that prevents a civilization from becoming advanced, like above a certain extent. So
Mm.
you're talking about like ancient or like great civilizations of our planet Earth, and like human civilizations, and I completely agree on that because like over the years we have stored a lot of data like about historical events and civilizations, but we also lost a lot of stories about them. We do not know like so many, one of the crypt like as far as I know, when it comes to wars, one of the strategies which people have been using to cripple another civilization is to destroy their books and their preserved things and their whatever culture or the history or the invention they have. So
Right.
like through this kind of strategy we have lost, and also like also in many other ways which I'm not aware of, we have lost a lot of things and a lot of inventions. And it's like hard to say that whether we currently are the most advanced or not, because if you look at the Egyptian pyramids, it's clearly a like thing of like debatable thing, like how did they make such a big gigantic engineering marvel back at like such a long time ago. People are still with we such like spacefaring technologies, we are not still being able to like crack down how did they make it, right? So it does like this thing itself does speak a lot about our own limitations. Like if
Mm-hmm.
we are limited by views like our own thoughts, then we like it's hard to escape our own thoughts, right? Because we only imagine things what we have heard about, or what we have some kind of knowledge about. If we do not even know what's there to explore, then how will we even imagine that, right? And another thing, like, I would like to talk about is, like, you saying that the stars might not even exist. So, like, to explain what she means by that is, light is one of the, like, the fastest things in the universe. Like, there is nothing
Right.
faster than light yet discovered. And light itself, like, the stars are itself were so far away that it takes like light years, like kilometers, meters does not apply in this like grand scale. We have to talk in light years
Right.
right now to like measure the distance, like measure the distance light has traveled. So let's say we have like short distances, so we do not even like notice the lag when like when if the light is bouncing off some surface. But if the distance is too big for the light, it takes some time to travel. It takes a lot of time to travel throughout the longer distances. So what that does is, when the light reaches to you, at that point the object might not even exist. So the stars
Mm-hmm.
which you can see right now might not even exist. And let's say the sun disappears, right? Like at the very moment, it will take us approximately 8 minutes to realize that the sun has disappeared, because it takes approximately 8 minutes for the sun's light to reach Earth. So if the
Mm-hmm.
sun disappears, we will realize it 8 minutes later. So the sun, which
Right.
we think is like very big, the light from the sun takes 8 minutes, and it's inside our solar system. And mind you, light
Exactly.
is the fastest particle, like thing which exists in our universe.
Mm-hmm.
So still, it takes 8 minutes. And so it
Yes, you're
should
absolutely
say
right
like
about
how
that.
far the sun itself is, even though we think it's so close to us. So
Right.
yeah.
Yeah, that is kind of a fascinating thing, and then when we have these solar flares that cause havoc with our, electronics and our, phone systems, communications, and everything. So the solar flares are quite powerful. But think about this for a second. People wonder, how could you space travel? Now,
Hmm.
one of the things that Einstein came up with, although he couldn't fully explain it before he died because he really couldn't fully explain it, was if you spend space and time, you can actually travel through it. And it's kind of hard to explain and fully understand that way. But basically, what they do is like wormholes and all these other things that you've heard about
Yes.
would help to speed up the travel through, interplanetary. Not so much going to Mars, but to go to like the other side of what's over on the side of
Hmm.
Pluto, which I'm still grieving. I think Pluto should have not lost its designation as a planet, but that's just me. They call it a dwarf planet, but hey,
Hmm.
you know, but we don't know what's out there. And the more we can learn about ourselves too. But the cool thing about the technologies that we actually develop going that way, um, like the hydrogen, for example. Hydrogen was used quite a bit in the space program, but they're looking at ways to harness hydrogen for use on Earth. Because our fuel cells, for example, that we had up on the vehicle, the byproduct was water. And that's how the
Hmm.
astronauts get their water, because they couldn't launch it. First off, there wouldn't be enough to launch, if everybody's drinking the water all the time. But it's a byproduct. So the things that we developed for our power systems, how do we know that we can't actually develop them for use at home? I've always been a big thing about hydrogen fuel cells. And
Hmm.
there's a company in Canada that's, they helped to develop our fuel cells. I actually called them last year and said, are you going to be considering this for residential? And they're like, right now we're doing commercial. Because think about it. If we all had like a fuel cell, I can talk about the safety of hydrogen in a second. But if we had a fuel cell that powered our homes, we would not have to worry about power outages. We wouldn't have to worry about storms taking down our infrastructure. We wouldn't
Hmm.
have to worry about people sabotaging our power stations or anything. It would be right there, you know? And the thing about hydrogen everybody gets really freaky about it. And they're like, well, don't you remember the Hindenburg? Well, I actually worked for the predecessor of a guy that went to Germany and talked to, he had a German interpreter so that he could understand the old German compared to what it is now. And he asked him, he said, so what'd y'all think about the Hindenburg? And they said it wasn't actually the hydrogen that caught on fire. It was the doping, the glue that was on the dirigible that actually ignited. And then it burned a hole through the side of the dirigible, and then the hydrogen did its magic. But it wasn't hydrogen itself. It's the smallest element, and it goes up. We've
Hmm.
had on our hydrogen tankers, that was a big worry about, well, what if you get in a car accident? They've blown bullets to try to shoot through our hydrogen tanks and our tankers that we used, and it wasn't successful. They couldn't get through them. So it could be an option, but we need to fully and better understand about what we have here on Earth that might be able to benefit us in the long run.
Hmm. There are many things from space and like the discoveries of space that can benefit us, and that's like I think another field of study we can dive deep into. But I would like to now talk about like moon missions, and like almost 50 years ago we have been to the moon and Neil Armstrong saying those famous words, and like people were all happy about it, even though like there are still conspiracy theories. People like to make their own conspiracy theories, and that's another like funny topic. But it's been 50 years, that we almost 50 years that we have been to the moon, and we are not like yet we have not gone back to the moon yet. So I would like to ask you two questions here, and one of them is, why is it taking so long for us to go back to the moon? And the second question is, like, there's this mission coming up from NASA called, I think it's the Artemis mission, which plans
Mhm.
to go back to the moon. So, like, can you talk about the Artemis mission, about, or what you know about Artemis mission as a former employee of NASA?
Yes. I've been asked that a lot about, well, why did we go to the moon and then why are we going back? Okay. I'll tell you a little bit about one of the conspiracy theories. We had this sound stage,
Mm,
and I've seen it. It was behind the operations and checkout building where the astronauts are, and then we have a lot of labs and things in there. And it was designed to look like the surface of the moon. And that's where the astronauts practiced. They
mm,
practiced, picking up samples. They practiced, driving their little rover and everything else like that. Well, we had some Japanese tourists that came in
mm,
back in the 60s. They did not speak English. We did not have interpreters. They just kind of went out there and looked at our stuff and thought, how cool is that? Well,
mm,
they saw that and thought that we staged the missions, that they never happened. They never launched. It wasn't real.
mm,
And
mm,
that's where one of the conspiracy theories came from. Now, if you've ever seen a Saturn V launch, and I didn't have the honor of doing that, but I've sure seen shuttle, you see this monstrous vehicle. Well, it's not real big, like the size of the orbiter is the size of a DC-8 airplane. But you see this thing take off, and it's got millions of pounds of thrust and a lot of smoke and fire. Well, vapors and fire and stuff like that. How can you fake that? How can you fake it being there and then not being there? Okay,
mm,
our missions were actually real, and we have an astronaut. God bless him. He's awesome. Buzz Aldrin. He's a
mm,
Apollo astronaut. And about 15 years ago, this reporter cornered him and said, "You guys never landed on the moon. This was all fake." And Buzz did what Buzz would do. He punched him in the face and knocked him out, because he was basically calling Buzz a liar, and the guy's still in amazing shape, and he just like cold cocked the guy. He said, you can't say this to me that it was fake. You know, it looks very grainy, and it looks very cryptic, and it looks kind of weird when you look at the old, film footage of it. is because you got to think about the technology we had in the late 1960s. It's not like it is nowadays. It is going to look delayed. It is going to look grainy. And the other thing that's amazing is the flag looks fake. Well, there's not really atmosphere on the moon. We don't have like winds to blow it and make it look all pretty. So they put a pole in it to hold it out into a straight position. And everybody's like, well, that looks fake. Well, you're looking at 1960s technology with a flag that is for real. And, you can't really fake that. So why are we going back? Part of it was after I retired, I think they looked and said, well, that's kind of ambitious to go straight to Mars. We don't have the propulsion systems to get to Mars. We don't have the infrastructure to get to Mars. One of the things that everybody talks about is, why do you guys care about water? Well, water is hydrogen and oxygen. And when I was there, they were talking about launching basically a fueling station, where you could separate hydrogen and oxygen, use the hydrogen, obviously, for fuel, and use the oxygen as an oxidizer and also to breathe. But I think they realized that it was a little bit too ambitious to jump from there to there, And Elon's probably going to get to Mars before NASA will. But they want to have a presence on the moon. And okay, that's good. And that's going to be like the stepping stone to go off into other distant interplanetary missions. But why are we going back? We'll learn a lot. We'll start getting more advanced in our abilities to be able to go off and jump to other planets and everything. But we don't know a lot about the moon, even though we've been there. And we sure know less about the Earth. But we're explorers by nature. Humans like to explore. So many times we look up in the sky and wonder, well, maybe that's just me, look out in the sky and wonder what's there, or if we're alone in the universe and things like that. They're deep philosophical questions. But the main thing is, how do we make life better on Earth? And how do we help people? And a lot of the medical procedures that we have nowadays, orthoscopic surgery is a good example. That was shuttle technology that came about with that.
Like it's already been 50 years and we all made so much of technological progress, and we got to know a lot about the moon and the space in general. So why did it take 50 years to take a serious attempt for going back to the moon?
That's an excellent question. I can only speculate about that, but as much as I like President Kennedy, he really wasn't a space visionary as much as he was a visionary. Okay, after Sputnik launched, everybody got kind of nervous about dominance in space, and we had the country behind us. We had Congress behind us, and once we made that milestone and landed on the moon, several times, it was kind of like, now what? And then that's when shuttle program came up. But there's not that, well, when the shuttle program was flying, we had a lot of different field centers, a lot of different states involved, and everybody's like, well, why didn't you centralize it? And the simple answer is, it took the government. You had to be behind anything that we did. So if we shared the love through the different states, we would oftentimes get those senators to give us money, and they would vote on the programs. So after shuttle program ended, it was like, okay, we're going to go to Mars. I mean, it was just like, boom, suddenly we're going to go to Mars. But we didn't have the technology to actually get us there, the propulsion systems. We knew it was going to be a one-way flight. We knew it was going to take like 9 months to get there. These things were not practical. So now they've set their sights back on the moon. But the purpose of going back to the moon is to create a complete human presence all the time and not leave again. We'll actually have a colony, if you will, on the moon, hopefully to go ahead and launch us back into, the stars or whatever. But that was a long answer to your short question. Why? Why did it take so long? I wish I knew. I mean, it was like, okay, yeah, we did all these wonderful things. We stayed in low Earth orbit. After 30 years, some of us were kind of getting, we love the program, don't get me wrong, but we're like, it's kind of boring in low Earth orbit. Where are we going to go? And then now all of a sudden it's going back to the moon.
Hmm.
But it's primarily to have a constant presence and also to use as a stepping stone to go off and do other flights into space, interplanetary, if you will. I wish it hadn't taken 50 years, but I wasn't in on that meeting.
Yeah. So the thing about like government agencies and system in general is like it's it can be bureaucratic, and like since the presidents can change after every 4 years, the president's vision can also change, and that causes like where you make a certain kind of progress towards a mission, and then oh, the president changed the vision, so you have to go back and make the changes again. So like this kind of back and forth and the bureaucracy and like the lack of sometimes lack of motivation, which uh, can not be seen in government agencies, but can be more seen in towards like private agencies, like something like SpaceX. I think that can also play a big role in like delaying missions and delaying since it's like not mainly it's mainly funded by the government and not through like their own profits and incentives. A lot of the things which like private space agencies can do quickly, it can take a lot of time for government space agencies to do, right?
Yes. Yeah, we have. There was a lot of bureaucratic type of red tape that was oftentimes had to be, orchestrated and coordinated. One of the things, like for our procurements, okay, we have to get 3 bids, and we have to get a government bid, and we have to see how they match towards the contractor bid to see if they're overcharging or whatever. People like SpaceX, they just go ahead and jump right in. They don't have to deal with congressional budgets. They don't have to deal with any type of oversight in that way. And then Blue Origin is also doing the same things where it's a private entity coming in, and everybody's like, well, where does that leave NASA itself? We were an administration overseeing these different things. So rather than be in the rocket business ourselves, because when you sit there and you have these different layers of things and you have to go through these different procurements, and we had to try to make everything even, that doesn't deal with private entities. Elon wants to go buy a widget, he can go down to Home Depot and buy a widget. He doesn't have to go through our procurement process. So there's a lot of time and money that is saved by being able to do that. There were others when the shuttle program ended getting all kind of mad about it, and they're like, well, what are we going to do now? We are going to go back into the research and development. We are going to go back into the science behind the missions and what we call buy rides on the rockets rather than build the rockets. It seems, just looking at it now, that NASA wasn't very efficient in building the rockets, but we sure were good at building the payloads and the science behind them. Like, the James Webb telescope, the Hubble, there was a lot of different types of missions that we launched. We should be in the business of doing that. We should be in the business of the research development and the science side of it rather than the rocket business itself, because we didn't do that very efficiently, quite honest.
Hmm. A few years ago, I've seen a video which explains how SpaceX makes rockets 10 times cheaper than like normal traditional NASA rockets, and like how like a SpaceX normal launch, depending on the payload, and I don't know how accurate that information it is, but it takes like around $80 million, whereas NASA's like traditional launch takes a lot more than that. And so what they do is traditional rockets have different suppliers. So let's say you are taking supply for a radio communication, then you're taking taking components like from the metal body, or then you are taking like components from like the fuel from another company. So what happens is each of the company, they sell it, but they have their own amount of profit percentage, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when finally the rocket comes up and accumulates, like it becomes a structure, it becomes like a huge cost because every company charges their own percentage of profit. So when it comes to an accumulation, it becomes very expensive. And at that time, the rockets were not reusable. So, like Elon Musk gives this analogy that imagine using a plane for once and throwing it away. Like how inconvenient and expensive would that be? So what SpaceX normally does is they make most of the components by themselves, which reduces that profit factor that you like have to percentage, like charge a percentage for every material that you're outsourcing. And so when it comes to the total accumulation of the rocket, it's much more cheaper. And since SpaceX rockets is reusable, there's just something called economies of scale, which basically is like if you increase the number of output, the cost per average decreases. So the cost per average per launch decreases because the rocket is reusable. But at that
Mhm.
time, back in the days, or traditional rockets these days are not fully reusable yet. That
Right.
increases the cost of launch, and this is why many government agencies or people, if they want to put something into space, or if they want to reach out to the International Space Station, they are choosing SpaceX because SpaceX is much more cost efficient, and I believe that their success rate is increasing day by day, and people just love to see the rockets landing back on the Earth.
Well, the first time I saw the reusables on SpaceX launch come back, it kind of reminded me like Buck Rogers kind of thing. It didn't even look real. Now I'm sitting
Hmm.
there on the Space Center watching it, and to watch these things two, boosters come down eloquently and land, flat on it, it was amazing. I think he lost one, and that was because it was in high seas and it kind of tipped over. But the biggest expense on a vehicle itself is the engines. Okay. And one of the ways that we were able to save money for shuttle was we reused the boosters. We had the recovery ships out there and they brought them back. It was a 4-segment booster and we got the engines and refurbished them. That's great. Well, that was really expensive, to have the crews and have the ships and have all that go on. But it was a cost of doing business for us, but we still saved those booster engines. Okay. Now, with the Artemis program and SLS, they're not going to recover those engines. We got a 5-segment booster going off that's going to become, you know, um, an artificial reef. It's going to drop in the ocean and that's never to be recovered. The way Elon has been successful is he's been able to recover those and refurbish them. Now, I'm not going to diss Elon, but I will tell you the differences between what's going on with the workforce in that. Okay. Elon gets a lot of young people that come in there and he works them for 60 to 70, sometimes 80 hours a week. That's a true statement. And I'm not dissing Elon for his methods of doing business, but they get burnt out. Or they're working there, they just got out of college, they get a lot of money. 4 or 5 years, they decide they want to go ahead and buy a house and have a family. They can't work those kind of hours. It's not very conducive to them. They don't have the government oversight either. Now, I will tell you that used to mess up a lot of my colleagues in the safety office. They're like, well, we have to have government oversight. They don't know what they're doing. Well, do they? That also added another layer. Now, Elon's able to run it himself. He's got OSHA that he has to deal with if there's a boo-boo. He has FAA that he has to go ahead and get his flight permits from and everything like that. But it's not that constant, expense, oversight, certain things that we do, procurements. The government cannot make a profit. We cannot make a profit. That's not what our business is doing. So we aren't driven by costs. They say we weren't driven by budgets and schedules. Well, we kind of actually were. But Elon's doing whatever the heck he wants, and he's able to do whatever the heck he wants, and he's actually quite a bright guy. So he was also something a lot of people don't realize. He had one more launch chance. He only had enough money for 3 launches. And if that last launch was not successful, he would have gone bankrupt and he would have been out of the business. But he managed to get it up and the rest is history, as they say. But we have other folks that are coming onto the scene, like, Blue Origin. I don't know if Boeing will ever get their vehicle up. Hopefully they will. But they had a competition to see who could be private industry, the most cost effective, for what the NASA missions are going to be. And quite honestly, I feel like NASA kind of lost its way for a while. We didn't have a mission after shuttle. And think about when the last time a shuttle flew, July of 2011. When the last shuttle happened, I said to my colleagues and the folks that I work with out at the press site, don't worry, we'll have another mission in about 5 years. We'll have another program in about 5 years. Well, fast forward 12 years, and we're still sitting to kind of where we are. And that it saddens me. But a lot of the folks that had the corporate knowledge to launch vehicles, had the rocket science experience, we all retired. So you have a bunch of new kids coming up trying to, put things together, and they don't have the knowledge or experience to do it. So that's also a big detriment. But, that's just the reality of it.
What are some of NASA's goals when it comes to the Artemis mission? What do they want to achieve from this mission?
Well, as what was the name of that character? Buzz Lightyear. As Buzz Lightyear says, to infinity and beyond. They're saying that Artemis is going to be our stepping stone to be able to go to that infinity and beyond. And I'm not fully sure because I haven't really seen anything come out of NASA to say, okay, after we do these missions, where are we going and what's going next? Sure, we want to have a habitable colony on the moon, but what's that going to look like? And how much does it cost every year? Because we'll have to get Congress. I'm not seeing those numbers coming out of NASA. I don't know. I don't know how they're doing it. And I know that the way they're doing their 5-year plans are not how we did them back in the day. So it seems like it's hard to get full information out of it because a lot of it is just kind of fluff and, we want to do these wonderful things. But what are these wonderful things and how much are they going to cost and when are you going to do them? See, those are answers that we don't have right now.
When you're working at that time, what kind of insights do you remember about this mission? I am pretty sure that it just did not come out of the blue. They have been planning about it for such a long time, and because it's a big mission. So, like, what do you remember about the plannings or from your colleagues about what you heard about the Artemis mission?
Well, when I retired, we were still talking about going to Mars.
Oh,
Okay. And then this came about after my retirement. But I still know people in the program, and I still keep in touch with a lot of the folks in DC that have the know on what's going on. It seems like an ambitious and a wonderful program, but what are we going to do with it? We have to have some kind of justification for doing these missions. Now, to say, okay, Artemis was going to launch us into a position where we could go to Mars, or Artemis is going to launch us into a position of being able to go into, interplanetary travel. Well, now it looks like we're going to be going to do moon missions, but what's it going to do after that? And how do we compete with SpaceX or Boeing to be able to do these? It's going to be tough. And I'm not really seeing anybody having any full insight into exactly what this is going to bring us. I mean, I hate to say it like that, but that's what I'm seeing. It's all a wonderful talk. It's all like, these are going to be wonderful things. What are these wonderful things? Tell me about them, So, I mean, it's commendable, I suppose, that we're going to be on the moon, but what are we going to do up there? Are we going to have permanent presence up there? Or if we manage to burn the Earth up, are we all going to go live up there? It's hard to say. I mean, what are you going to do? I'd rather try to avoid
they say
having.
that moon have like pretty valuable minerals, which is like very expensive on Earth, and they can be used for various purposes, for fueling and stuff like that. So maybe that's why they want to go up to the moon and extract those minerals so that it can be used in Earth and stuff like that. You know.
Yeah, they do. They talk about helium-3 a lot. And one of the questions I asked about that is, okay, you want to go up there and get helium-3. How are you going to get it back to Earth so we can use it? And I was met with deer in the headlights looks. Nobody had that answer. You could talk about these things being valuable, but what are you going to do with them when you get them? You know, you don't fully understand it. And how much is it going to cost to get it back to Earth? I mean, I've heard all kind of things. People are talking about, creating some kind of elevator, 235,000-mile elevator to get this stuff back. It didn't make any sense, really. But yeah, but there's also valuable minerals here on Earth. And they talk about some of them being in deep sea, and they aren't able to get to the deep sea ones. So why don't we try to mine the ones there, or come up with alternative energies here on Earth? I'm a big alternative energies kind of person, but we're not doing that either. They didn't ask me.
So when we were talking about like extracting minerals, I got reminded of this movie called Don't Look Up. So have you seen that movie?
Oh yeah. Oh, I have.
So like the spoiler alert, this movie, basically the whole theme is there's the scientist, which is apparently Leonardo DiCaprio, and his team predicts that a big asteroid which can destroy Earth is going to like hit the planet within like a few months or so, and like he's trying to make everyone alert, but nobody's taking like him into account. And he went to like famous TV shows and he literally shouted, and then people were thinking that they're mad. Um, you should see it, but the main point is like, so they finally did manage to convince the U.S. government in the movie that okay, now we're supposed to go to the asteroid and destroy the asteroid. So what this billionaire guy does is he has obviously good connections with the U.S. government, and he like cancels the mission by talking with the U.S. government, because if you destroy the asteroid, it apparently turns out that you're going to like miss out on like billions of dollars of minerals. What is the whole
Yeah.
point of like having billions of dollars of minerals if you do not even live? And then the billionaire was like saying, "Oh, we cancel the mission because we can use it to make technology devices, and we can it is like worth billions of dollars." And Leonardo was so disappointed. And I mean, finally, like he managed to like convince the government by somehow, and that was like a total joke. I mean, you should see the movie. It basically was released, I think, during the COVID times, or like right after COVID times, and it showed like perfectly all the flaws that the governments had in in managing COVID in a very sarcastic manner. And that's,
Hmm.
I think it's kind of dark humor as well, because it showed the dark side of our society globally, in or like more towards America, in a very sarcastic way. Like Leonardo, if you can relate with it, I could relate with it a little bit. Like the asteroid was kind of the COVID pandemic situation, and Leonardo was Dr. Fauci, I think. It's just my speculation, like the celebrity scientist or doctor, stuff like that, who was coming to the show and stuff like that. And there was a stage of denial in the movie that the asteroid doesn't exist. And when it comes to the COVID, Trump also denied that like the China virus or something like that. Like it's not going to impact uh, the US, or it's not going to impact, but it eventually did come. And when it came, it was pretty bad, right? So something similar happened with the asteroid stuff in the movie as well. So you should like definitely check it out if you want to have some fun, like laugh or something like that.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting about that movie because how true could that be? We did what they called the DART mission not too long ago, and the DART mission was where we put a probe on a asteroid to try to see if we could deflect its path in case something was coming our
Hmm.
way. And they said it was successful, but I never saw any of the science off of it. And then what was the trajectory after they they did that. But that movie also brings about an interesting point. Everybody had their little world and their little fiefdom, and that happens throughout the government where, oh, that's my project. I'm protecting it. It may not make any sense, but it's my project and I'm protecting it. And it's kind of like when Meryl Streep took off in that spacecraft. What happened to everybody else, and where did they actually end up going? But that's for a different day. But it's more like people get into these little glitches and say, okay, I don't want to give this up. No matter how much it doesn't make any sense, it's my project. And that's not very good thinking, but it happens a lot with these people that they're trying to protect, their little kingdom, that they see it. So that's what that scientist was trying to do. It's like, but we got this. Well, if we don't have our lives and we don't have a planet, how good is that all going to come together? But yeah, you're right about the COVID thing. And it's, in my point, it's kind of tragic because I am a scientist and I had people degrading me. It was like probably the worst thing to even talk to somebody about the logic and science behind something. They go off on the little tangent of, well, my cousin's brother's sister's mother said that this isn't dangerous. Well, what data are they using? Well, they saw it on Jerry Springer or something. They don't have anything that they back it up with. And that, I just kind of have to smile and say, yeah, okay. The mask thing. People were like, masks don't work. I said, well, if masks don't work, next time you have surgery, tell the surgeon it's optional. And then they kind of like, well, okay, maybe they do. But everybody, when they get into a place of panic or confusion, they tend to not use logic. That's like the last thing that they use, and it's the first thing they should be looking at. We have to really look at what we want to do. We have to really look at things that we want to do as a civilization, not separate countries and different things like that. Where do we want to go? And I've never figured out why we all can't get along. I've traveled all over the world. My dad was in the military. And one of the things he taught us was accept people's differences, understand the culture, understand where people are coming from, and we're not doing that anymore. We're all looking at each other and pointing fingers at how things are different, or they're different, or they believe different things, so they must be bad. That's not true. So if we come together as a planet, I think that, and that's one of the reasons I kind of hope we found aliens, it'd be like, okay, if we find aliens, it's now us. We don't have to be us against them, because I really have this belief that like they'd have this like death ray that they could blow Earth apart if they really wanted to, but they obviously don't. So why can't we get along? Seriously. I mean, I don't understand it. It frustrates me.
As a scientist, what do you think about that movie? Don't Look Up, and how could you feel, like, what's your feelings about Leonardo's character and basically the scientist's character in that movie? What's your opinion on that?
Leo DiCaprio and I forgot the name of his female sidekick, but I see that happening, and I'll give you a good example of that. When we launched Hubble and we opened that mirror, it didn't work. And it was because it was just like a micro little bit off. And there was he was a college intern up at Goddard. And he said, I got an idea. Why don't we put a contact lens on it? And he was laughed at by his branch chief and his division chief. And he went to his director. Now, can you imagine this young kid that hasn't even graduated from college yet saying, all we have to do to fix Hubble so that it's in focus again is put a contact lens on it. And everybody's like, okay, that's the stupidest idea I've ever heard. It actually was the most brilliant idea, and that's how we got it to work so that we could actually see those beautiful images. When you come up to something, and I've done this too, I've pitched to management and they either love the idea or they hate the idea. And that's kind of what Leonardo was doing in that movie, is he was trying to bring forth information that was very significant, that was validated. You can see it with your own eyes, and he was ignored. And that's tragic because I think everybody has a value. But it's kind of close to that when we sit there and we come up with an idea, or when, I was still there and coming up with an idea, are they going to accept this? It shouldn't be a question, and we shouldn't have to go fight for it, but we do. And that's exactly what he was trying to do. I mean, it's kind of hard not to notice that there's this freaking meteor coming right at you, and he still had to try to convince people.
One of the difficulties I have seen that they face as a scientist is trying to break down complex mathematical and scientific data to the public. And I have seen often people like the people on YouTube who tries to explain scientific events. They have to simplify it a lot. So, how much difficult do you think that task is, and how do you like how much data do you lose in terms of actual fact when you're trying to simplify things that are actually not that simple?
Well, I used to do a lot of presentations for NASA, and I'd have to consider the audience. And you can break it down into digestible pieces of information. But what people mostly want to know is what's in it for me and how does this affect me? They don't really care about all the science behind it so much, but they want to know what it does, how does it affect me, and how does it work, kind of thing. And that's all you focus on. You don't focus on any of the chemistry or the physics or any other things that go behind it. They want to know what is it. And sometimes it's hard to bring it down to that level, but you have to remember everybody comes from a different place of knowledge. So we can easily explain things to people in such a way that it doesn't get all sciencey and everything, but we bring it down to a day-to-day level for a day-to-day average person so that they can understand it.
How hard do you think it is to break it down, the information?
Well, it's hard to, it depends on what you're talking about. I've had, I've done presentations to grade school kids, and they're like, well, how does a rocket work? And I don't want to get into all the different aspects of rocket science. So I'll say, well, we have a pointy end, and the pointy end goes up, and then we have some things that get mixed, and there's little nozzles that the mixture comes out of, which has flame and smoke. But as long as that pointy thing's going up, it's going to have the opposite effect and push it up into space. They don't want to care about any other stuff. They don't want to care about orbital mechanics. They don't want to care about thrust and things like that. We just have to say, okay, the rocket has a reaction and it makes a flame and it causes a lot of power to come out the back end. So it pushes and then we go up. It's kind of how you do something like that. Some people would ask me, how do the astronauts take showers in space? Well, I don't want to get into the fact of transpiration and respiration and condensation are very nasty on electronics. So I break it down to them like, okay, their hair, they wash it with dry shampoo and they take a sponge bath and do all these different things and capture it. And then make the water so that it's recycled and is actually able to be drank. People don't realize that. But they want to hear about it on their own level. Now, I wouldn't go into a room with physicists and have that same conversation. But, you have to, what's in it for them and how does it affect them?
So, like, a few years ago, I don't know, like, I forgot the exact date of the launch of the James Webb telescope, and during the James Webb, it's been like years of work, like a few decades or so, and the
Yeah.
James Webb is like the most advanced telescope we have sent up there, and it's not even like close to our orbit. it's like far away from the Earth's orbit, unlike the other space telescopes, like the Hubble Space Telescope, which was like relatively close to our Earth's orbit compared to where James Webb Telescope is. It's farther away. Like if I try to break it down, it's farther away from us because the farther away it gets, it can like capture more light from like the distant universe, and even though that makes it the location, like placing it further away from like the Earth, makes it very hard to maintain and to run the space telescope, but it allows us to capture more light and more like not even light, visible light. There are like this spectrum of lights like ultraviolet, infrared, and whatnot, and
Hmm.
that's another physics thing. It can capture all of them. I'm not sure whether it's all of them or not, but like I think it can capture the infrared rays at least, and then we can take the data to analyze and to form a picture. That's just very simplified, and probably there's some mistakes in that version of explanation as well. But yeah, that's why it's like placed a little bit further away. And as a scientist and as someone who's worked for NASA before, what do you expect from the James Webb's endeavor, and like how excited are you about it?
Oh, I'm incredibly excited about it. And you're right about how long it took. I had a colleague that had worked on James Webb for 15 years, and there was a question about whether they would continue to get funding, and thankfully they did. But people wonder, why are we doing this? Seriously. But what we're able to see and what we have actually confirmed with James Webb is that there's other universes in our galaxy. I think that's a game changer right there. They have
Mm-hmm.
found literally thousands, if not millions, of other planets that could actually inhabit Earth. And they're talking about these planets being in what they call the habitable zone, where it would have similar climates to us, which means they may actually have, doppelgangers or whatever they want to call it out there of us, you know? And that gives us a greater understanding. Now, what are we going to do with that? Probably they're looking at us like we're a bunch of barbarians because we can't even get along with our neighbor right now. But it might end up being okay. If you guys don't want to replicate why you guys had 5 extinctions on your planet, here's how we learn to get along. But you actually look at these and you're saying, this can't even be real. I mean, I've seen some of the photos and you can actually see the galaxies, which is mind boggling. So they got planets in there. Why wouldn't they? They've got suns in there. So why wouldn't they have other Earth-like planets? And that's kind of exciting to me. I swear, I really wish we'd find life elsewhere in the universe to come back and tell us, you guys can't keep going on this path. You can't hate your neighbor and you can't hate other people for things because you're just going to blow up your planet. But what fascinates me most, I think, and my grandkid can attest to this, is I watch some of these, stories about the aliens, stories about the planets, and it doesn't make any sense. It's like, okay, this is something that existed 25,000 years ago. But in human terms, 25,000 years ago, we were still hanging out in caves and, playing with rocks and trying to build fire. How did we manage to build advanced structures? You mentioned the pyramids. That's also kind of one of those confusing things. How on earth did they do it? There's got to be technology we're not knowledgeable at this point that does exist, because obviously, they've got something as magnificent as the pyramids. How do they build them? I heard somebody say it would have taken every human being on Earth working 24 hours a day for 50 years to build even one of those pyramids. But when you look at them, look how close those stones are, and look how they're put together. We don't understand it. There's theories about, more advanced civilizations came down and used magnetic lift, like a mag train, to build these different things, like Stonehenge and things like that. We don't have a full understanding. but a lot of people aren't even willing to accept what they're seeing, other than, okay, they built these a long time ago. But how? It's so intriguing.
A few days ago, I saw a YouTube short like where Michio Kaku was saying that from the discoveries made by the James Webb Telescope, there are like chances which will set the world of physics and physicists into chaos because it might discover things which we, the physicists or the scientific community, believed it to be true for a long time and it worked, but the discoveries made by the James Webb Telescope can change a lot about what we know about our universe and what is like the established fact about our universe. So, what are your thoughts on that?
Well, there's different organizations. Like right now, there's civilian organizations that are trying to look at, is extraterrestrial life a possibility? Is advanced technology being developed by them that we don't fully understand? My dad said that they won't talk about if there are, in fact, aliens because they're afraid that they're going to make everybody's mind implode, that it would rewrite history, it would rewrite religion. Okay, well, I got a good idea. Why don't we just ignore it as if it doesn't exist instead of accepting that it could be a possibility? Okay, if you got folks that are like planet in a planetary flight, for example, we don't know how it happens. We don't have that knowledge right now. But obviously, if it's happening, somebody else does. So rather than fear it, why don't we embrace it and accept it? But it would really change. I look at it as like we're doing all these little baby steps, and there may be other civilizations doing marathons. Okay. And we are so far behind, even though we think we're so advanced, that if we do find out about these things, we should embrace them and understand it rather than saying, I don't understand it, therefore I don't want to know about it, therefore let's not even focus on it or even ask questions about it. I mean, that doesn't make any sense to me.
I mean, it is understandable that when we, let's say, we have our own habit or like established facts which we have used in calculations and in theories and in experiments, and they have seemed to work pretty well. But if something or sudden like an advanced technology or an instrument discovers that, oh, this is not the right thing, this is the wrong thing, or something like that, or like there can be something better than what we are already using, it can be it can trigger many scientists and people because they have believed that to be true for a long time and it has worked for a long time. And I think this is where one of our human limitations also comes in when it comes to how little we have in terms of our brain's capacity and scope, is that we are limited by our own intuitions and thoughts and what we already know about our life and our beliefs and our tradition and whatnot. We have limitations which prevents us from being um, like all outrageous and full on exploration mode, because if because we feel uncomfortable and icky if someone says that, oh, what you have believed for such a long time is wrong, or these things needs to be changed or something like that. Which is why if we talk about generally, a lot of people find it hard to especially the older generations find it hard to accept changes when it comes to our like daily living, because they have believed in certain way of living, a certain way of life, and if you suddenly tell them that, oh, you're wrong or you should change this way, then it becomes hard for them to accept the new change, even if they're like literate and they're explorers and whatnot, right? So I think similar kind of psychology also applies for the scientists who have been working with these theories for a long time.
You're very right on that. But think of it this way. maybe we're just not even scratching the surface on what we know, like, for example, in physics. Okay, when those fighter
Mm.
jets saw those um, uh, unidentified aerial phenomena running around, they're like, wait a minute, they're pitching and gimbaling that are against our knowledge of physics. They're going in directions that we can't understand, that defy anything that we know. Okay, well, they're observing it, so obviously it's there. But if you think of it like you go through school and you learn math, okay, as opposed to calculus or differential equations or getting back up there. Yes, what you know is legitimate and true, but you haven't explored these other ideas. So rather than kind of totally say, well, we're just going to throw it all away, I'd say we're just not scratching the surface because our knowledge is so small in that matter. Like, we know what we're doing right now with physics and rocket science, that all works, okay? But
Mm.
what we don't know is what the capabilities actually are. If you don't, completely throw it away, and you shouldn't. But I think that there's stuff we really don't fully understand. So I'd like to
Mm.
think of it as we're not scratching the surface, and these other opportunities may come up. Because if someone comes to me and say, well, everything that you learn, Gail, doesn't work, or it's ridiculous, think some other way, I'll say I can embrace what I know, but I'm willing to open my mind to the other possibilities. So that's where I
Mm.
think we are right now, is we don't fully understand what we don't fully understand, you
Mm.
know? And they say, well, all religions will change. Well, best I know, and I've studied world religions, we all have the same belief systems. We all believe in a higher power, an higher being, whatever name that you want to put on it. But that doesn't mean that if we find out that there are extraterrestrials out there, that's not going to say that there's still not some source or God or power or whatever you want to put the name on it that actually is at the instrumental part of it all. You know, it's kind of a different philosophy on it, but I don't think that we really can. I think we'd be arrogant to think that we're the intellectuals in the universe, and I'd also think that there's stuff we don't need to know or we don't know yet, but will come. And I'll give you a good example of that. Again, going back to my dad, when we were talking about Roswell that day, he says, "Have you ever noticed after 1947, all of a sudden we developed NASA and NACA and started getting interested in space?" He said we went from transistors and resistors right to electronics.
Mm.
And every year we have more and more. Like if you told somebody 50 years ago that there would be 3D printers, they'd be like, what are you talking about? But see, the knowledge is there. And where did it come from? How did we get from Orville and Wilbur on a beach in North Carolina to being able to fly to the moon, in such an actually a very short time in civilization?
It's around like um first planes were flown around like 1920, and the moon mission happened in 1969. So it's around like 40 years or so.
Hmm.
So I might be wrong with the calculation, but it's very short time if you compare like the first time we flew and comparing to the first time we went to the moon. So yeah,
Hmm.
like that's a very rapid technological advancement.
It is, but where did it come from? I mean,
Hmm.
12,000 years, you got an Earth that's 6 billion years old. 12,000 years ago, we were hanging out in caves, eat saber-toothed tigers. And next thing you know, we're going to space. I mean, how do you make that kind of jump? I mean,
Hmm.
my phone has got more technology in it than we used to go to the Apollo missions. I don't know, I'm dating myself here, but a Commodore 64 computer, um, that had more power in it than what we used to go to the moon with. So how do we make these massive advances? It it's mind-boggling, and I don't think we really know.
Hmm. What are the future projects when it comes to space that you are really excited about right now, and what do you think? Um, what kind of results are you expecting from those endeavors?
Well, to me, I would like to know more about our own Earth. I would like to
Hmm.
see missions that worked with NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, to fully understand what our own planet. So I think that there could be some work there and some knowledge there. As far as anything that we do outside of our own Earth, I would like to see it benefit man. I know one of the things, like, oh my gosh, I can't even begin to tell you how many conversations I've had about the ozone layer, for example. We understand it, we can see it, and they don't, they're like, oh, well, that's not happening. I would like to be able to have one day where you put information in front of somebody and they don't go running off with a conspiracy theory or anything like that. But I would like to see any and everything that NASA and NOAA put together benefit humankind. And I would like to have a better understanding of our own planet. And I believe that those two agencies can definitely help us in those regards. If you throw in other things like the Department of Energy to find out how we can better serve people on Earth without burning up our atmosphere, without making our oceans so warm that we have these massive, horrible storms come through, we need to have a greater understanding of the impact that we have on our own planet and see if we can also benefit our, others in the long run. That would be my ultimate ideal for seeing what happens with my agency that I used to work for.
Hmm. Someone wants to, like, there are people who are interested about space and wants to know about where we come from and our origin. So what are the some kind of like space related books, movies, and YouTube channels would you recommend people to read or watch?
There's so many. I kind of stay away from science fiction. I kind of like the science fact. Apollo 13 was always a good one. I had the honor of working on a underwater habitat for NASA. I mean, that's a different podcast altogether. But while I was there, I was working a project with Christopher Russa, who was Stuart Russa's son. He was on the Apollo 13 mission, or Apollo 12. He flew Apollo 12, and I was like, well, your dad's going to fly after that. How's that going to? And he said that was very accurate. These other ones like um, The Martian, I watch them and I can blow holes through them, telling you, well, that's Hollywood, and, ingenuity there and things like that, and what's not real. But it's the idea that, we are explorers, and anything with space. I've been watched a lot of Ancient Aliens. That it's like a documentary, but what's cool about it is they actually go to these ancient sites and try to explain how the heck did these happen. Like in Peru, how do we got these runways that, what are they for? You see the hieroglyphs, you see all that kind of stuff. So I kind of like to look at those, and that's just me, the actual documentaries that actually explore our own planet to see if we have been having visitation in the past, those kind of things. But, when I was growing up, or my kids were growing up, E.T. was a big popular movie, but that was also obviously fiction. But I tend to lean towards the ones that are more factual, that actually explore remnants on our planets. So any of those type of shows, I really encourage people to look at, because it starts to stir the imagination and has you thinking, could this possibly be? They have this. They've carbon dated it. So, maybe there's something to that. But then you can, watch fun shows too, like Gravity, or, any of the other ones that came up that we know are just not really scientifically based, but they make for a good movie. But anything to get people interested in space and flight and exploration are always my favorites too.
There are some channels which I would like to recommend. Specifically, like I have not like seen many movies, but I whatever knowledge I gathered about space and interest I gathered about space is because of YouTube channels, and like some of them are you can also check them out. And there's this channel called What If. And so what if is what they do is they try to break down different kind of hypothetical scenarios, like what will happen if the sun disappears for 5 minutes or 1 minute. What will happen if the oxygen disappears and stuff like that. So based on that, they try to explain the science behind it. And they basically imagine and break down like our shower thoughts kind of thing, and
Hmm.
that is one channel. Another channel I would like to I can remember right now, it's Aperture. Especially like it basically it's about the older videos of Aperture. They are really thought provoking videos, and it makes us question about life and existence and stuff like that. And through that manner, like the narrator also gives a lot of knowledge about our life and thoughts and existence, which we might not be even aware of. And
Hmm.
this one is called real life engineering. So real life engineering of like it's not like specifically about space and stuff like that, but um, they try to break down like different engineering structures and how it happens, and tries to simplify and explain it to people. And there's I got like reminded of this guy called the Everyday Astronaut. So I don't know whether you follow him or not. So basically, there's this guy who is very passionate about space and stuff like that. So he basically makes content like surrounding space and rocket launches and stuff like that. He got a like pretty decent interviews with Elon Musk as well when he unveiled the Starship. What's your opinion about the Starship and the Starship mission? Did you see the
That's
rockets?
gonna with Elon.
Yes,
Are you talking about his Starship?
yes.
Well, that's going to be really interesting, and it's very ambitious. Um, but given his track record, I'm seeing that it's quite possible to be able to do a Starship. It's going to cost a lot of money, and it's going to take a lot of brain power to make it happen. But I don't think it's outside the realm of possibility, especially
Hmm.
given the fact of how fast we've advanced in our technology. So it's going to be really interesting to see that one. Yeah, for sure.
Hmm. So there is this another channel. I don't know how it's called, like or pronounced. It's called Kurz Kazar the Nutshell, if I'm not wrong. So what they do is they make animations, and through animation and through fun motion graphics, it explains theories, like science fiction theories about climate change, about space, about like some of the theories I talked about in this podcast, like the Great Filter and stuff like that. Um, they I basically learned about it from Kotzkozat and some other channels that I mentioned. And I talked about these channels because they help me more to learn about the facts about space travel and science in general. And they they do an amazing job in breaking it down and like explaining complex topics. And if you guys are aware of any other like channels and sources who explain science pretty well, then please make sure you comment it down below so that other people can learn and about the universe and where we come from, and because it's like a reflection of our us humans us humans as to where we come from, and it's important for us to know more so that we can bridge the gap which already exists. So um, like last few questions I would like to ask is, you have worked for NASA for a long time. What are some of the things that NASA would not like the public to know, if you're like allowed to share, or some of the things which people do not know in general about NASA?
Oh my gosh. when I was in the propellants group, the reason that public affairs used to tap on me to come help them with the photographers and the media is because I had a lot of area permits and I had a lot of safety training and stuff like that. So I got to say that some of those media guys would come at me with some really wild questions. Okay, I'll give you a couple of good examples of that. Like one night we're working. It's late. It's so late. And it was when President Bush had canceled the shuttle program. And they came running at me and they said, "We know why the shuttle program was canceled." And I'm like, "Oh, do tell." Because photographers always got the best stories. X-34 is going to launch astronauts. And I'm like, first off, it's not rated for human flight. The tower wasn't rated for human flight. They never came to us and told us that we needed to give them anything for their life support systems or anything like that. And I said, you guys are right. Maybe they have recruited all of the 3-foot-tall fighter pilots in the military, and they've taught them how to hold their breath for 6 months so that they could launch. And then they're going to come out on the runway and then throw their arms up and say, "Hey, we're here." And they said, "Well, is that possible?" I said, think about what I just said. 3-foot-tall fighter pilots. They're not going to have them. It's not a manned vehicle. So it took me I don't know how many months to convince them that it wasn't a human-rated flight vehicle. Another photographer came to me and he said, "I looked at the north end." Now, NASA's got 140,000 acres. Kennedy Space Center is 140,000 acres. A lot of it's buffer zone. He looked at a map that had been stitched together from satellite flights, so it looked like we had these crooked runways. And he comes at me with this picture and he says, "Do you want to explain these crooked runways to me? What are you guys doing now?" I said, I tried to explain to him that it was a stitched together satellite photo, but it didn't go very far. The only secrets that we have, okay, first off, we don't have really any secrets. We're an open agency. The one thing that we will not tell anybody about, out of courtesy, is how the astronauts, we lost 27 astronauts. We're not going to talk about how they actually died. It takes not a lot to figure out how they actually died, but we don't talk about that. One of the things that I have found fascinating, especially watching all these little UFO shows that I've been watching, is how the astronauts have actually observed things, but NASA's not talking about it. I don't know why, and I know that our filing systems will allow for, things like the unidentified air phenomena that they talk about now, but there really wasn't any secrets. And it was hard to explain to people that we didn't have any secrets. The first flights of shuttle, we had military payloads that went up and they were classified. But we quit doing that after Challenger. There's really nothing hidden. And that amazes people that we really tell everybody that's actually what's going on out there, except in the cases of how crews died, out of respect. But we didn't have any deep hidden secrets, unfortunately. Sorry.
They say that NASA secretly stores an information which it does not want to reveal to the public because it gives them some kind of unfair advantage. Plus, if they many speculate that if NASA discovered aliens, but they're not talking about it because if they talk about it, then it will create a chaos in human civilization, and because we don't know how to talk with them, we do not know how to communicate, we do not have any contingency plan if something like that happens. So many people think that because of these reasons, the government is dealing secretly with it and not coming out on public and stuff like that. They relate it with the things like the Pentagon and the Area 51 thing, and they raid Area 51 and stuff like that, to and they also connect the Roswell incident with it and stuff that. And they say that the
they're
US
still
government
denying the Roswell incident. But see, the thing about Area 51 is people don't realize that we have something called Skunk Works, which we do with highly advanced aircraft. Mm-hmm. And that's what basically Area 51 established itself as. Now, what they're doing now, we don't know. We've, we've heard the stories, but nobody fully understands. And I kind of think that there might actually be some top secret projects out there that may be reverse engineered alien spacecraft. We don't know because they look absolutely so weird, like the stealth aircraft, for example. But there is, I've heard some of the Apollo flight tapes, and they talk about things like, I have a bogey at 10 o'clock. And a bogey is usually an enemy aircraft or something that's unidentified. So why would they be talking about that kind of stuff? But you can't find any of that in the NASA archives, per se. But if you ask certain astronauts, like Story Musgrave is a firm believer that there's extraterrestrials, but it's never talked about. And again, that might be the thing. Our brains are going to implode if we find out that we're not alone in the universe. I completely disagree. But I talked about this earlier. There's civilian groups. The CE5 is one of the ones that are talking about, we're not going to wait until the government decides that we may get this information. We're going to go ahead and seek it out ourselves. We're not going to be concerned about freedom of information and requesting files. We're going to see for ourselves once and for all, and we're going to document among ourselves what we're actually seeing. So I think that's actually how we're going to find out. It's not a government agency or NASA or the military coming back at us and saying, because some of us actually do believe that there are unidentified aerial phenomena and there could be alien beings with it. But we're not going to hear that from the government. We're going to find that out on our own.
That's something that creates the speculation and the conspiracy theories, because there is no official declaration of it, but still people like to think about it, and when it logically makes some sense, they believe it to be true, and the conspiracy theory and whatnot. So actually, when it comes to space and exploration, there's a lot of things we can talk about. I feel like this podcast is like still incomplete, because I would have loved to know about your experience about like the moon landing, how you felt when that happened, where you were at that time. But due to like time limitations and stuff like that, I cannot maybe we can talk about those things further in the next podcast. You never know what might happen. So
I'd love to, but I will tell you real quickly where I was July 1969. My dad had been called up to go to Vietnam. We were on our way from Arizona to the Panhandle in Florida for him to go through survival training. Lo and behold, not too far from there, a few hundred miles, Apollo 11 was getting a launch. Now, around the same time, I was still giving my dad a hard time about the UFOs. I said, Dad, why did you not take us to Cape Canaveral to see that? He goes, well, I didn't think anybody would be interested in it. I'm like, oh my God, really? So when Neil Armstrong actually landed and walked on the moon, I was sitting in a hotel in El Paso, Texas on our way out. And I was sitting there staring at it. Now, I'll date myself. I'm 9 years old, looking at the moon going, we have people up there. That's so cool. I would love to do that myself. So that inspired me and kept my desire and love for the space program going since 1969 when I experienced that and saw it. And that's kind of that short story, but it was amazing to me. It was not even understandable. But I gave my dad a hard time about why didn't he take us to go see it.
What practical advice would you like to give to young people who would like to explore more about space and would like to know about our origin and the universe and stuff like that?
The first thing I would say is don't be concerned about getting an astrophysics degree. You can do it at any level you want. I'm a perfect example of someone that had all the odds, that's for different podcasts, but I had all the odds stacked against me of being successful in life. Yet somehow I managed to do that. And I would say learn what you want to learn about. And if you want to become part of the space program, don't think you have to put on a flight suit. I mean, we got everything. We got graphic designers. We've got people that run our studios. We got people that do the public affairs. They all come from different levels of education. So if you really want to go after it, don't think that you have to be like the biggest brain on the block. Learn what you're interested in and follow that dream. You know, if you can see it, you can achieve it. And I think that anybody that wants to go ahead and look at going, I mean, one of the last presentations I did, for NASA was going to schools and talking to the kids, getting them all jazzed up about space. It's not as common nowadays. Kids don't want to be like policemen, firemen, or, astronauts or anything. But to just have that little spark of imagination to see what's possible and pursue it, follow it. Finish college or finish high school. You don't need to even have a college degree to work out there, but find what you love and realize that you can incorporate that if you desire to go after a program or a job with any of these aerospace companies. It's quite doable. It's quite exciting. But learn, study, and ask questions, and don't be afraid to ask questions. Don't be like that young intern, or be like that young intern that said, hey, what if we put a contact lens on it? Come up, think outside the box. Do it, make it happen. It's exciting.
Well, thank you, Gail, once again for coming on to my podcast. Again, I feel like there's an overwhelming amount of knowledge and insights I gained from this episode, but I would have liked to dive deep into more subjects and topics because there is literally no end to what you can know and stuff like that. But for time constraints and limitations, I have to end the show right now. So thank you
Okay.
once again for sharing your valuable knowledge and giving your time to this show and to my podcast. Thank you, Gil.
Well, Mashira, it's an honor, and thank you again. Maybe in a future podcast we can actually talk about, what it was like to, no, I'm not it, but I can tell you what it was like in the day to day for astronauts and what they had to go through. So maybe we could do a future podcast of, the life of an astronaut getting ready to fly, and once they're in space, to break it down into the human aspect of what life is like on a mission.
Yes. That's another interesting topic, and we can talk about that maybe in the future podcasts. So, thank you,
I'd love
Gail,
it.
once again for coming on to my
Thank
show.
you. And I appreciate it. And I really enjoyed chatting with you today.